If you love gripping stories that pull you in and don't let go, you're in the right place. This is Mr. Gray Stories. My 8-year-old son took a DNA test and matched with a billionaire family I spent years trying to erase from my life. That alone should have been enough to shock me, but it wasn't. Because the moment I saw the name attached to that result, I didn't feel confused. I felt exposed, like something I buried carefully had just been pulled back into the light without my permission. Have you ever built a life so stable, so peaceful, that you almost convinced yourself the past couldn't reach you anymore? Have you ever looked at your child and realized they might be the very thing that brings everything back? Because that's exactly what happened to me. And the truth is, this wasn't just about a DNA test. This was about a man I once loved, a man I walked away from, a man who never even knew he had a son. Before we go any further, I need you to be honest with me. If your past knocked on your door like this, would you answer it? Go ahead and like this video. If you believe some things never truly stay buried, and tell me in the comments, would you open that door or keep it closed? Welcome to Mr. Gray Stories. Here, we tell the kind of stories that stay with you, stories that challenge you, comfort you, and sometimes even change you. If you're new, go ahead and subscribe. You're exactly where you're meant to be. Oakland mornings didn't try to impress anyone. They moved steady, predictable, real, and Vanessa had built her life to match that same energy. At 36, she wasn't chasing a perfect life anymore. She had already let go of that idea. What she had now was something stronger: control, stability, a life she built herself, without depending on anyone. She flipped a pancake in her small kitchen, the soft sound filling the quiet space as she glanced toward the table. "Ryder," she called, not raising her voice. "If that tablet is raising you, it better start contributing to rent." No response. She turned slightly. He was fully locked in, fingers moving fast, eyes glued to the screen. "Ryder." Still nothing. Vanessa sighed, placing the spatula down and folding her arms. "Okay. Now I know you hear me." Without looking up, Ryder replied, "I'm doing something important." Vanessa tilted her head. "Oh yeah? More important than breakfast?" That got his attention. He looked up immediately, serious. "Yes." She raised an eyebrow. "All right, let's hear it." Ryder turned the tablet toward her just enough to show he meant business. "I'm building my family tree." Vanessa froze for half a second. Not enough for him to notice, but enough for something inside her to react. "You're what?" "My teacher said we should learn about where we come from," he said proudly. "So I signed up for one of those DNA test things." The air shifted, quietly, but completely. Vanessa blinked once, slow and controlled. "You did what?" Ryder smiled, excited, completely unaware. "It's cool, Mom. It shows you people you're related to, like cousins and grandparents, and maybe even—" Vanessa turned back to the stove, picking up the spatula again. Her movements were steady, but no longer relaxed. "Ryder," she said carefully, "where did you sign up for that?" "Online. It was easy." Of course it was. Everything starts easy. She placed a pancake on his plate. "Eat." Ryder grabbed his fork, already distracted again. Vanessa stood there for a moment, watching him, watching how normal everything felt, and knowing how fragile that normal really was. Because there was a part of her life she never talked about, not because she forgot, but because remembering came with consequences, and some truths didn't just explain the past. They changed what came next. Later that evening, the apartment felt different, quieter. Ryder sat on the couch, legs swinging slightly, staring at the screen in front of him, waiting. Vanessa sat nearby, phone in hand, but not reading anything. She felt it again, that quiet tension she couldn't explain. "Mom," Ryder said suddenly. She looked up. "Yeah?" "It says my results are ready." Something inside her tightened. "Okay, go ahead." He tapped the screen. A few seconds passed. Then his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. "Mom." Vanessa sat up straighter. "What is it?" He turned the tablet toward her. "It says I matched with a family." "That's normal," she replied. Ryder shook his head. "No, I mean, like a really important family." Her stomach dropped slightly. "What do you mean, important?" He hesitated. "There's a name here." Vanessa reached for the tablet, and the second she saw it, everything stopped, because that wasn't just a name. It was a life she walked away from, a man she never truly left behind. Alexander's family, and just like that, the life she built so carefully, was no longer standing still. Vanessa didn't sleep that night. It wasn't that she couldn't. Her body was tired. Her eyes burned. The apartment was quiet, but her mind refused to slow down. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling, one arm resting across her stomach, the other holding her phone loosely against her chest. That name kept replaying in her head, over and over, not distorted, not unclear, sharp, accurate, unavoidable. Alexander's family. She turned her head slightly, looking toward the hallway that led to Ryder's room. The door was slightly open. A soft glow from his nightlight spilled into the hallway. He was asleep, peaceful, unaffected, and that made it harder. Vanessa sat up slowly, pressing her feet against the cool floor. For a moment, she just stayed there, elbows on her knees, phone hanging loosely in her hand. This doesn't make sense, she whispered to herself. But even as she said it, she knew it did. There was only one way her son could be connected to that name, only one man who tied everything together. Alexander. She exhaled slowly, leaning back and running her hands over her face. Years. She had gone years without hearing his voice, without saying his name out loud, without allowing her thoughts to settle on anything that reminded her of him. Not because she forgot, but because she chose not to remember. There was a difference. Remembering came with weight, with questions she didn't want to answer, with emotions she had already worked through once, and she wasn't interested in doing that again. But now, she didn't have that choice anymore, because this wasn't about her. It never was. The next morning came too quickly. Vanessa stood in the kitchen again, going through the same routine, but nothing felt the same. The movements were automatic. Pour, flip, plate. But her mind was somewhere else. Mom? She looked up. Ryder was already at the table, but he wasn't on his tablet this time. He was just sitting there, quiet. That alone told her something had changed. You okay? She asked, keeping her voice soft. Ryder nodded, but he didn't reach for his food. Vanessa walked over slowly, pulling out the chair across from him and sitting down. What's on your mind? He hesitated. Not long. Just enough to show he was thinking carefully. Does this mean I have more family? The question landed differently than anything else he had said. Not exciting, not curious in a playful way. This was deeper. Vanessa leaned forward slightly, resting her arms on the table. You've always had family, Ryder. I know, he said quickly. I mean like other people. From before. The words echoed quietly. Vanessa reached out, gently adjusting the sleeve of his shirt, a small gesture, but grounding. We're going to figure that out, she said. Together. Ryder looked at her, searching her face. You promise? Vanessa didn't hesitate. I promise. That was enough for him. It always was. He picked up his fork and started eating, just like that. Simple. Resolved. But Vanessa stayed where she was for a moment longer. Because, for her, nothing about this was simple. By midday, the clinic was busy. Phones ringing, people walking in and out, conversations overlapping. Normally, Vanessa thrived in that environment. Structure helped her focus. But today, it barely touched her. She sat at her desk, staring at her screen, reading the same line over and over without processing any of it. Her phone rested beside her, face down, silent, but heavy, because she knew. It wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when. A DNA match like that didn't go unnoticed, not in a family like his. Her fingers tapped lightly against the desk. Once, twice. Then she stopped. Her phone buzzed. Just once. Short, sharp, final. Vanessa's hand hovered over it. For a second, she didn't move. Then slowly, she flipped it over. Unknown number. Her chest tightened slightly. Not panic. Recognition. She stared at it as it continued to ring. Every instinct told her exactly who it was. And for a brief moment, she considered letting it go to voicemail. Keeping control, keeping distance, keeping things exactly as they were. But that option had already passed. The moment Ryder clicked that result, everything changed. Vanessa picked up the phone. held it to her ear. Hello? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough to feel intentional. And then, a voice. Vanessa. Everything inside her went still. Not from fear, from certainty. She closed her eyes briefly, gripping the edge of her desk with her free hand. Years disappeared in a single second, not gradually, not gently, instantly. She stood up without thinking, stepping away from her desk, toward the window, like she needed space to hold the moment. Her voice, when she spoke, was controlled, but not untouched. How did you get this number? A quiet exhale came through the phone. I've always had it. That answer sat between them, heavy, loaded, because it didn't just explain how, it raised a different question entirely. Why now? Vanessa turned slightly, staring out at the street below. People moving, cars passing, life continuing like nothing had changed. But for her, everything had. She swallowed once, steadying herself, and waited, because she knew the next words would change everything. Vanessa didn't speak right away. She stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear, her reflection faintly staring back at her through the glass. Vanessa, Alexander said again, softer this time. I hear you, she replied. There was a brief pause, not awkward, just careful, measured. I saw the DNA report, he said. Vanessa let out a slow breath. Of course you did. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It carried everything they hadn't said in years. Then he asked the question, direct, unprotected. Is he mine? Vanessa closed her eyes. For a second, she allowed herself to feel the weight of it. Not the question, the truth behind it. When she answered, her voice didn't shake. Yes, no build-up, no hesitation, just truth. On the other end, Alexander didn't respond immediately, and that silence spoke louder than anything else. When he finally spoke, something had changed. I have a son. Vanessa's grip tightened slightly around the phone. You've had a son for 8 years. Her tone wasn't loud, but it was firm, grounded in something deeper than anger. Alexander exhaled slowly. I didn't know. Vanessa turned slightly, her reflection now facing her directly. You didn't ask. That landed, hard. But she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because the truth didn't require volume. Another pause stretched between them, longer this time, filled with everything that could have been said years ago. I would have been there, he said finally. Vanessa shook her head slightly. We don't know that. You don't believe that? He asked. She didn't answer immediately, because belief had nothing to do with it. What mattered was what actually happened. You weren't there, she said. Simple, clear, final. Alexander didn't argue, didn't defend himself, and that alone said more than any explanation could. Vanessa shifted her weight, glancing briefly toward the hallway in her mind, toward Ryder. I raised him, she continued. Every step, every question, every moment. I know, Alexander replied quietly, and I'm not trying to take that away from you. That caught her attention, not because of what he said, but how he said it. There was no pressure in his voice, no control, just awareness. I want to meet him, he added. Vanessa's response came instantly. No, the word was sharp, reflexive, protective, and for the first time in the conversation, Alexander paused longer than before. Not because he didn't expect resistance, but because he felt how real it was. I understand why you'd say that, he said carefully. Do you? Vanessa replied. Yes, that answer wasn't rushed, and that made her listen. I missed years I can't get back, he continued. I'm not trying to walk in like nothing happened. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. Because you can't. I know. Again, no argument, no pushback, just acceptance. And that made this harder, because she had prepared herself for resistance, not accountability. Vanessa walked slowly across the room, her steps quiet against the floor. We're not doing this your way, she said. A pause. Then, okay. She stopped walking. That word hit differently. Not defensive, not strategic, just agreement. Vanessa turned slightly, her tone steady. We do this slowly. I agree. And on my terms. Another pause. But this one felt different, like something had shifted. All right, Alexander said. That was it. No negotiation, no conditions, and for a brief moment, Vanessa felt something she didn't expect. Relief. It came quietly, almost unnoticed, and that made her cautious. Because relief meant space, and space meant possibility, and possibility was dangerous. Ryder doesn't know anything yet, she added. Alexander's voice softened. What does he know? That he matched with a family, she said. That's it. Another pause. Then we start there, he replied. Vanessa nodded slightly, even though he couldn't see it. Then we start there. Silence settled again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was steady, as if both of them understood something without needing to say it. Then Vanessa spoke. I'm not doing this for you. I know. I'm doing this for him. I know. That word again. Consistent. Grounded. And for the first time in this entire conversation, she believed him. Before the moment could stretch any further, Vanessa spoke again. Why now? The question was quiet, but direct. Alexander didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried something real. Because now I know. Vanessa looked down slightly. That answer wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And right now, honesty mattered more than anything else. A few seconds passed. Then, I'm coming to Oakland tomorrow. Vanessa's heart skipped. Not dramatically, just enough to remind her this was real. She didn't respond right away. Her mind moved quickly, but her voice stayed calm. You don't just show up. I'm not, he said. I'm letting you know. There was a difference, and they both understood it. Vanessa exhaled slowly. Tomorrow doesn't mean access. I understand, and it doesn't mean anything changes overnight. I know. That word again. Steady, consistent, grounded. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly, because deep down, she knew something had already changed. Not outside, but inside. All right, she said quietly. And just like that, the line between her past and present was no longer separate. Before we go any further, if you've ever had to face something you thought you left behind, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, would you have answered that call? Because what comes next changes everything. The next morning didn't feel like a new day. It felt like a continuation of something unfinished. Vanessa was already awake before the sun fully settled over Oakland. She stood by the kitchen window, arms folded lightly, staring out at the street below. Cars passed. A man walked his dog. Someone across the street pulled open a shop gate with a loud metallic scrape. Everything moved like it always did. Steady. Uninterrupted. But Vanessa didn't feel steady. She hadn't slept more than a few hours. Not because she stayed on her phone, not because she kept moving, but because her mind stayed alert, waiting, preparing. She turned away from the window and walked toward the stove, reaching for the pan. Her movements were slower than usual, not tired, just deliberate. She needed control, even in something as simple as breakfast. A few minutes later, the familiar scent filled the kitchen again. Routine, something she could rely on. Mom? Vanessa glanced over her shoulder. Ryder stood at the edge of the hallway, rubbing his eyes slightly. You're up early, she said. He nodded, stepping forward. You too. Vanessa gave a small smile. Couldn't sleep. Ryder walked over and climbed into his chair, resting his chin in his hand. Are we doing something today? The question wasn't random. It carried curiosity, expectation. Vanessa placed a plate in front of him. Yeah, she replied calmly. We might have a visitor. Ryder's eyes lifted immediately. A visitor? She nodded once. Someone important. He straightened slightly. From the DNA thing? Vanessa didn't answer right away. She picked up a glass, poured juice, and set it down in front of him. Then, yes. Ryder leaned back in his chair, processing that. Do I know them? No. Do you? Vanessa paused for half a second. Yes, that was enough, for now. Ryder accepted it without pressing further, reaching for his fork. But Vanessa noticed something. He wasn't as distracted as usual. He was thinking. The hours moved slower than they should have. Vanessa cleaned the apartment twice, adjusted things that didn't need adjusting, checked the time more than she wanted to admit. Each movement had a purpose, but underneath it all was one thing: preparation. Not for a conversation, For a moment. Because she didn't know what version of Alexander would step out of that car. The man she remembered, or the man he had become. And more importantly, what would that mean for Ryder? Vanessa stopped in the middle of the living room, looking around. Everything here told a story. Photos on the wall, Ryder's drawings on the fridge, a life built from consistency, not promises. And she wasn't about to let anything disrupt that, without control. By late morning, the air felt heavier. Not physically, internally. Vanessa stood near the window again, this time not pretending she was just looking outside. She was waiting. Her phone sat on the table behind her. No new messages, no updates, just silence. But she knew. He said tomorrow. And Alexander was not the type to say something casually. He meant it. Always had. A car turned the corner at the end of the street. Vanessa's posture shifted slightly. Not obvious, but enough. The car didn't rush. It moved smoothly, deliberately. And then it slowed, right in front of her building. Vanessa didn't move immediately. She watched. Every detail. The way it came to a complete stop. The brief pause before the engine cut off. The stillness that followed. Her heart didn't race. It tightened. Controlled. Aware. Ryder's voice came from behind her. "Mom?" She didn't turn yet. "Yeah? I think that's them." Now she turned. He was already standing near the couch, looking toward the door. Curious. Calm. Unafraid. Vanessa walked over slowly, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "Stay right here for a second, okay?" Ryder nodded. "Okay." Vanessa stepped toward the door. Each step felt measured, intentional, not hesitant, just aware. She reached for the handle, paused, just for a second, not because she was unsure, but because she understood exactly what this moment carried. Then she opened the door, stepped outside. And there it was, the car, parked, waiting. The door opened, and everything she had prepared for became real. The car door closed with a soft, controlled sound. Vanessa stood a few steps away, her posture steady, her expression composed, but her attention fixed. Alexander adjusted his jacket slightly as he stepped forward. Time had changed him, not in a dramatic way, but in the details, the way he carried himself, the way he paused before moving again, more measured, more aware. But his eyes, they hadn't changed, and when they met hers, it didn't feel like years had passed. It felt like everything they never finished had been waiting right here. "Vanessa," he said. Her name left his mouth carefully. Not distant, not familiar either, something in between. Vanessa nodded once. "Alexander." No smile, no hesitation, just acknowledgement. For a brief moment, neither of them moved. Not because they didn't know what to do, but because this moment didn't allow anything unnecessary. Alexander took one step closer, then stopped. Not too close, not distant, respecting something unspoken. "You look well," he said. Vanessa held his gaze. "So do you." Her tone was even, neutral, but not empty. There was history in it, years of it. Alexander glanced toward the door behind her for a second, then back at her. "I didn't want to just show up without—" "You did show up," Vanessa replied. Not sharp, just factual. Alexander accepted that. "You're right," he said. A brief pause followed, but this one wasn't heavy. It was adjusting, finding a rhythm neither of them had anymore. Vanessa crossed her arms lightly, not defensive, grounded. "You said you were coming," she said. "So now you're here." Alexander nodded. "I am." Another pause, short, but full of observation. Vanessa noticed the way he looked around, not searching, just taking in where she lived. Not judging, not reacting, just seeing. "You've built a life here," he said quietly. Vanessa didn't respond immediately, because that statement wasn't simple. "No one built it for me," she replied. Alexander looked back at her. "I can see that." There was no pity in his voice, no regret layered into it, just recognition, and that made it land differently. Vanessa shifted slightly, letting the silence sit for a moment before speaking again. "He's inside." Alexander's attention sharpened, not dramatically, but enough. Vanessa noticed, and she held that moment. not to control it, but to understand it. Before anything happens, she said, you need to be clear on something. Alexander nodded once. I'm listening. This doesn't move fast, she continued. This doesn't adjust to you. Her words were calm, but firm. This is his world, she added, not yours. Alexander didn't interrupt, didn't challenge. He let her finish. And when she did, I understand, he said. Vanessa studied him for a second longer, not looking for the right words, looking for truth, and for the first time since this started, she didn't see resistance. She saw restraint. That mattered, more than anything he could have said. Vanessa stepped slightly to the side, creating space between herself and the door, but she didn't open it yet. Why didn't you ever ask? She said suddenly. The question came without warning, not emotional, not loud, but direct. Alexander didn't look away. I thought you made your choice, he said. Vanessa's expression didn't change. And that meant you stopped showing up completely? I didn't know what showing up would look like if I wasn't what you wanted anymore. That answer was quiet, but honest. Vanessa exhaled slowly. That's not how life works. I know that now. No defense, no justification, just acknowledgement. Vanessa looked at him for a moment longer, then nodded once. Not agreement. Acceptance. Good, she said. Another pause. Then, you don't get to rewrite anything, she continued. You don't get to act like you've been here. Alexander met her gaze fully. I won't. And you don't make promises you're not ready to keep. I won't. There was no hesitation in his voice, and that mattered, because hesitation would have broken this moment completely. Vanessa stepped toward the door again. This time, she opened it. Not wide, just enough. Ryder was standing a few feet back, watching. Quiet, observing everything. Vanessa glanced at him briefly, then back at Alexander. This is where it matters, she said. Alexander didn't respond. He didn't need to, because for the first time since he arrived, there was nothing to say, only something to face. Vanessa stepped aside, fully this time, and the space between past and present closed. Ryder didn't move at first. He stood near the couch, hands at his sides, eyes fixed on Alexander. Not scared, not excited, just curious. The kind of curiosity that comes from trying to understand something that doesn't fully make sense yet. Vanessa stayed near the door, watching both of them, not stepping in, not interrupting. This moment didn't belong to her. It belonged to what was about to form between them. Alexander stepped inside slowly, not with hesitation, but with awareness. He didn't reach out, didn't try to close the distance too quickly. He stopped a few feet away from Ryder, lowered himself slightly, not fully kneeling, but enough to meet him closer at eye level. For a second, neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other, studying, comparing, searching for something familiar. Ryder tilted his head slightly. You look like me. The words came out simple. No build-up, no emotion behind them, just observation. Alexander's expression shifted, not outwardly, but enough. I was thinking the same thing, he replied. Ryder took a small step forward, not cautious, just interested. He looked closer, like he was trying to confirm something he already believed. Vanessa felt it, that quiet shift in the room, not tension, not relief, something in between. Ryder's voice came again. Are you my dad? There it was, no confusion, no hesitation, just a direct question. Vanessa's breath slowed. She didn't speak, didn't move. This wasn't her answer to give. Alexander held Ryder's gaze. He didn't rush, didn't soften it, didn't complicate it. Yes, one word. Clear, steady, real. Ryder blinked once, processing. Then, okay, that was it. No dramatic reaction, no emotional overflow, just acceptance. Because for him, this wasn't complicated. It was new, and that made all the difference. A small pause followed. Then Ryder asked, Do you know how to play video games? Vanessa almost laughed, but stopped herself. Alexander let out a quiet breath. I think I can figure it out. Ryder nodded. Good. Because I'm really good. That shifted everything. Not completely, but enough. Ryder walked toward the console, picking up a controller and handing the second one to Alexander without hesitation. "Sit here," he said. Alexander looked at the controller for a second, not confused, just unfamiliar. Then he sat, next to his son, close but not forcing closeness. Ryder turned on the game, immediately focused. "Okay, don't press random buttons," he said. "You have to follow what I do." Alexander nodded slightly. "I'll try." Vanessa leaned lightly against the wall, watching, not analyzing, not judging, just observing. Because this was the part she couldn't predict. Not the conversation, not the outcome, but this moment, where everything real began. Ryder moved quickly, explaining things in short bursts. "Go left. No, not that left. This left." Alexander adjusted. A second too late. Ryder sighed. "Okay, we're going to lose if you keep doing that." Alexander glanced at him. "I just got here." Ryder paused, then nodded. "All right. I'll give you one more chance." Vanessa smiled slightly. There it was, normal, unexpected, but real. Minutes passed, then more. The game continued, not perfectly, but steadily, and something shifted again. This time, it was quieter, deeper. Alexander wasn't trying to impress. He wasn't talking about anything outside this room. He wasn't asking heavy questions. He was just present, listening, following, learning, and Ryder responded to that, not with excitement, but with comfort, the kind that builds without being announced. At one point, Ryder glanced at him and said, "You're getting better." Alexander nodded. "Good teacher." Ryder accepted that. Simple, direct. Vanessa looked away for a second. Not because she didn't want to see it, but because she felt it, and feeling it meant acknowledging something she hadn't prepared for. This could work. Not perfectly, not easily, but genuinely. After a while, Ryder set the controller down. "I'm hungry." Vanessa pushed herself off the wall. "I figured you would be." Ryder looked at Alexander. "You eat regular food?" Vanessa let out a quiet laugh. Alexander smiled slightly. "I do." "Okay," Ryder said. "Because we don't do anything weird here." Alexander nodded. "Understood." Ryder walked toward the kitchen. Just like that. Comfortable, unaffected. Vanessa watched him go, then turned to Alexander. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. But this silence was different. It carried something new, recognition, not of the past, but of what was possible now. Vanessa exhaled slowly. "Don't rush this," she said quietly. Alexander shook his head. "I'm not," and she believed him. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't do. Before we go any further, if this moment right here meant something to you, go ahead and like this video. And tell me in the comments, do you think moments like this can fix years apart? Because what comes next is where things truly get tested. The kitchen filled with quiet movement, not rushed, not tense, just unfamiliar in a way that felt new. Ryder stood on a chair near the counter, watching closely as Vanessa moved between the stove and the fridge. He kept glancing back at Alexander, who remained seated at the table, hands resting near his plate, not checking his phone, not distracted, present. Ryder noticed that. "You don't talk a lot," he said suddenly. Vanessa paused briefly but didn't turn. Alexander looked at him. "I talk when I have something to say." Ryder nodded slowly. "That makes sense." Then he added, "Most adults talk too much." Vanessa let out a quiet breath through her nose. Alexander's lips curved slightly. "I'll keep that in mind." Ryder turned back to Vanessa. "Can he stay longer?" The question landed directly. Vanessa placed the plate down in front of him before answering. "We'll see." Ryder didn't push, but he didn't look fully satisfied either. He slid off the chair and carried his plate to the table, sitting across from Alexander. "You have to eat everything," Ryder said. "She doesn't like when people waste food." Alexander glanced briefly at Vanessa. "I won't waste anything." Ryder studied him for a second, like he was measuring something. "Good." They started eating. For a few minutes, the only sounds were forks against plates and the occasional shift of a chair. Then, "What do you do?" Ryder asked. Vanessa looked up slightly. Alexander answered without hesitation. I run a company. Ryder frowned. That sounds boring. Vanessa almost laughed. Alexander didn't react negatively. It can be, he admitted. What kind of company? Ryder asked. Technology. Ryder leaned back slightly. Like games? Some of it connects to that, Alexander replied. Ryder's interest shifted immediately. Do you make money from it? Vanessa gave him a look. Ryder, what? He said. It's a real question. Alexander answered calmly. Yes. Ryder nodded slowly. Okay, that makes it less boring. Vanessa shook her head lightly, but she didn't interrupt further. She was watching, not just what was being said, but how it was being handled. Alexander didn't correct Ryder harshly, didn't try to impress him. He met him where he was, and that mattered. After a few more bites, Ryder leaned forward slightly. Why didn't I know you before? The question came naturally. No accusation, just curiosity. Vanessa's hand paused mid-motion. Alexander didn't look at her. He answered Ryder directly. Because I didn't know about you. Ryder blinked once. That's weird. It is, Alexander said. Ryder thought about that for a second. Then, are you going to leave again? Vanessa's attention sharpened. That question carried something different, something deeper. Alexander didn't answer immediately. He leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on the table. I'm here now, he said. Ryder tilted his head. That didn't answer my question. Vanessa almost stepped in, but she didn't. Because this mattered. Alexander adjusted his words. I'm not planning to leave. Ryder studied him, not emotionally, just carefully, then nodded once. Okay, that was enough for now. But Vanessa knew that question would come back again, in a different form, at a different time, and it would require more than just an answer. After breakfast, Ryder pulled Alexander back toward the living room. Come on, he said. You need more practice. Alexander followed without hesitation. This time the space between them felt smaller. Not forced, just less distant. Vanessa stayed behind for a moment, clearing plates slowly. Her movements were steady, but her thoughts weren't, because what she was seeing didn't match what she expected. There was no pressure, no control, no attempt to take over, just presence, and that created a different kind of tension. Not resistance, adjustment. Vanessa dried her hands and walked toward the living room, stopping just at the edge. Ryder was already explaining something again. No, you have to wait. If you go too fast, you lose. Alexander followed his instructions more closely this time, and it showed. Ryder noticed. You're getting better. I had a good teacher, Alexander replied. Ryder accepted that easily. Vanessa leaned lightly against the wall, arms crossed, not defensive, just grounded. She watched them, not as a moment, but as a pattern forming. And that was what unsettled her. Because patterns meant consistency, and consistency meant change. And change was something she didn't control yet. Time passed without announcement. No one checked the clock. No one rushed anything. At one point, Ryder laughed. Not loudly, but freely. Vanessa felt that, more than anything else. Because that sound, that comfort, didn't come easily. And now it was here, without force, without effort. She looked at Alexander again, not as someone from her past, but as someone stepping into her present. Carefully, respectfully, and for the first time. She didn't immediately question it, but she didn't trust it either. Not yet. The evening settled in quietly. No announcement, no shift in tone. Just a gradual dimming of light as the day moved on. Ryder had fallen asleep earlier than usual, stretched across the couch with one arm hanging off the side, completely at ease. Vanessa had covered him with a blanket without waking him. Alexander noticed that, the way she moved carefully, the way she adjusted things without making it obvious. It wasn't something you learned, it was something you became. Now, the apartment felt different again. Still, but not empty. Vanessa stepped outside, closing the door gently behind her. The air was cooler, not cold, just enough to clear her head. She rested her hands lightly on the railing, looking out at the street below. A few cars passed. Distant conversations drifted from somewhere down the block. Normal. Grounding. A few seconds later, the door opened again. She didn't turn. She already knew. Alexander stepped out and stopped beside her, not too close, not distant either, the same careful spacing he had kept all day. For a moment, neither of them spoke, but this silence wasn't uncertain, it was deliberate. Vanessa broke it first. "You didn't try to impress him." Alexander glanced slightly in her direction. "I didn't think that would work." "It wouldn't," she said. A brief pause. "You listened," she added. "I needed to." Vanessa nodded once. Then her expression shifted. Not outwardly, but enough to signal something deeper. "I used to wait for that," she said. Alexander didn't respond immediately. "I know," he said after a moment. Vanessa let out a slow breath. "No," she replied quietly. "You didn't." That landed differently, not as criticism, as truth. Alexander accepted it. "I didn't understand what you needed back then." Vanessa turned slightly now, looking at him. "And now you do." Alexander held her gaze. "I understand what I didn't do." That answer stayed between them. Not perfect, but honest. Vanessa looked away again, back toward the street. "I spent a long time being angry," she said. Her voice wasn't heavy. It was clear, measured. "I thought about all the ways things could have been different," she continued. "All the things I should have said, all the ways I should have handled it." Alexander listened, not interrupting, not reacting too quickly, just taking it in. But eventually she added, "I realized something." He waited. "I wasn't raising anger," she said. "I was raising a child." That shifted everything. Not loudly, but deeply. Alexander's posture changed slightly, more still, more focused. "So I had to let it go," she continued. "Not for you, not to fix anything, but because holding on to it didn't help him." Her words were steady, grounded in experience, not theory. "I made a decision," she said. "Every day I chose what kind of environment he would grow up in." Alexander nodded slowly. "And you did that alone?" Vanessa didn't respond immediately. Then, yes, not defensive, just factual. Alexander looked down briefly. "I should have been there." Vanessa didn't react right away, because that sentence, while true, didn't change anything. "You weren't," she said. Simple, clear, but not harsh. And that difference mattered. Alexander looked back at her. "I can't change that." "No," Vanessa agreed. Another pause. "But you can decide what happens next." Alexander held that, not rushing to answer, not making promises, just understanding the weight of it. Vanessa studied him for a second. "You don't get credit for showing up once," she said. "I'm not looking for credit." Good, because that wasn't something she was willing to give. Not easily, not quickly. Vanessa shifted her stance slightly, folding her arms, not closed off, just grounded again. "He doesn't need perfection," she said. "He needs consistency." Alexander nodded. "I can do that." Vanessa looked at him carefully, not judging the words, measuring the intention. "We'll see," she said. A few seconds passed. Then Alexander spoke again. "I didn't come here to take anything from you." Vanessa's expression didn't change. "You couldn't," she replied. Another quiet moment. Then, "I came because I should have been here a long time ago." Vanessa exhaled slowly. That sentence, that one, carried weight. Because it wasn't defensive, it wasn't strategic. It was late, but real. Vanessa looked at him again. Longer this time. And something shifted. Not trust. Not yet. But openness. A small amount. Enough to move forward. "Just don't confuse showing up with being present," she said. Alexander understood exactly what she meant. "I won't." And this time, she didn't question it immediately. The night didn't rush them back inside. It held them there, just long enough for everything unsaid to settle into something quieter. Vanessa remained by the railing, her arms resting lightly, her gaze fixed ahead, but not really focused on anything in particular. Alexander stood beside her, not speaking, not filling the space unnecessarily. That restraint mattered, more than anything he could have said, because in the past, silence between them had meant distance. Now, it meant awareness. Vanessa shifted slightly, adjusting her stance. "You've changed," she said, not as a compliment, not as a question. As an observation. Alexander didn't respond immediately. I had to, he said after a moment. Vanessa glanced at him briefly. Why? That question wasn't simple. And he knew it, because what I thought mattered didn't hold up the way I expected, he replied. Vanessa turned her attention back toward the street. That sounds like a safe answer. It's an honest one. She didn't argue that, but she didn't accept it fully either. Not yet. What does that actually mean? She asked. Alexander took a breath. Not to delay, but to choose his words carefully. It means I built a life that worked on paper, he said. Everything was structured, planned, controlled. Vanessa listened, but it didn't leave room for things that didn't fit into that structure, he continued. She nodded slightly. And I was one of those things, she said. Alexander met her gaze. Yes, no hesitation, no adjustment, just truth. Vanessa let that sit for a moment. Then, and now? She asked. Alexander didn't look away. Now I understand that control doesn't create stability the way I thought it did. Vanessa considered that. Not emotionally, logically. You're saying you were wrong, she said. Yes, that word carried weight, because it wasn't softened. It wasn't redirected. It was owned. Vanessa looked at him more directly now. And what makes this different? She asked. What makes this not another version of you deciding something and expecting everything else to adjust? Alexander didn't respond immediately, because this time, the answer required more than acknowledgement. I'm not asking anything to adjust, he said. Vanessa held his gaze. I'm adjusting. That landed, not dramatically, but clearly. Vanessa turned slightly, facing him more fully now. That sounds good, she said, but it doesn't mean anything yet. I know, and knowing doesn't equal doing. I know that too. There was no frustration in his voice, no defensiveness, just understanding. Vanessa studied him for a second longer, then looked away again. Because this was the part she didn't trust, not his words, but what came after them. Time, consistency, that couldn't be proven in one day, or one conversation. You don't get to pick up where things left off, she said. Alexander nodded. I wouldn't expect to. Good, because that wasn't an option, not for her, not anymore. A quiet pause followed. Then Vanessa spoke again. We don't start from the past, she said. We don't try to fix it. Alexander listened closely. We start from where we are, she continued. Her voice was steady, clear, grounded. And where we are, she added, is not what we used to be. Alexander held that, didn't interrupt, didn't try to shape it into something else. I understand, he said. Vanessa exhaled slowly, because saying that out loud made it real. Not just for him, for her. This wasn't about going back. It was about moving forward, carefully, with awareness, without assumption. Alexander took a small step back, not away from her, but out of the moment. I should go, he said. Vanessa didn't stop him, but she didn't respond immediately either. She let the silence sit. Then, okay, simple, no extra meaning attached. Alexander glanced toward the door, then back at her. I'll call, he said. Vanessa nodded once. Don't call if you're not ready to follow through. I am. She didn't question it, but she didn't confirm it either, because this time, words weren't enough. Alexander turned and stepped toward the door. He paused briefly, not expecting anything, just acknowledging the moment. Then he went inside. Vanessa stayed where she was, for a few seconds longer, looking out at the same street, but seeing it differently now, because something had shifted, not dramatically, not completely, but enough to change what came next. And for the first time since all of this started, Vanessa didn't feel like she was holding everything together alone. Not fully, not yet, but the weight had moved, just slightly. Time didn't make an announcement. It didn't mark the shift with anything dramatic. It simply moved forward, and for the first time since Alexander stepped into their lives, he moved with it. The first week felt unfamiliar, not uncomfortable, just different. Vanessa noticed it in small ways, not in what Alexander said, but in what he did. He called when he said he would, not early, not late, on time, every time. The first call came the next evening. Ryder answered before Vanessa could reach the phone. Hello? A pause. Then, oh, it's you. Vanessa watched from across the room. Ryder's expression didn't change much, but his tone shifted slightly. You said you would call, he added. Another pause. Then, okay. He handed the phone to Vanessa without looking at her. He wants to talk to you. Vanessa took the phone. Hello? I said I'd call, Alexander said. She leaned slightly against the counter. I noticed. There was no extra conversation, no attempt to stretch the moment. Just confirmation, and that mattered. By the second week, the visits became part of a pattern, not random, not occasional. Consistent. Alexander didn't arrive early. He didn't arrive late. He showed up exactly when he said he would, each time. Vanessa paid attention to that, not openly, but carefully, because consistency wasn't something she accepted easily. It had to be proven, repeated, observed. Ryder adjusted faster. That didn't surprise her. Children adapted to presence before they questioned it. Are you coming today? Ryder asked one afternoon, standing near the door. Vanessa looked at the clock. He said he would. Ryder nodded. Then waited. Not impatient, just expectant. A few minutes later, a car pulled up, right on time. Ryder didn't run to the door, but he moved closer. Ready? Vanessa opened it. Alexander stood there. Same posture, same calm presence. Hey, he said. Hi, Vanessa replied. No extra words. No forced interaction, just acknowledgement. Ryder stepped forward. You're on time, he said. Alexander nodded. I told you I would be. Ryder accepted that easily. Okay. Come on. He turned and walked inside without waiting. Alexander followed. Vanessa watched that closely, because that small exchange, that simple expectation, meant something bigger. Ryder was starting to trust a pattern, and patterns were fragile. By the third week, routines began to shift. Subtly, but noticeably, Alexander started picking Ryder up from school. Not every day, but enough to matter. The first time it happened, Vanessa stood outside the building, watching from a distance. She didn't announce herself. She didn't interrupt. She just observed. Ryder walked out with his backpack hanging off one shoulder. He looked around once. Then, he saw Alexander, and his reaction wasn't dramatic. It was simple. He walked toward him. Hey, Ryder said. Hey, Alexander replied. You're early. I had time. Ryder nodded. Good. Vanessa stayed where she was, watching, measuring. Not the moment, the consistency behind it. Because one visit meant nothing, but repeated presence, that was different. Days continued to pass. Then more. Nothing rushed. Nothing forced. Alexander didn't try to change their routine. He adjusted to it. That difference mattered. Vanessa noticed how he asked questions. Not to control, but to understand. What time does he usually eat? What days work best for you? What does he like doing after school? Simple questions, but intentional. And Vanessa answered them. Not fully open, but not closed either. Because effort, when consistent, created space. One evening, Ryder sat at the table, finishing his homework while Alexander watched. Not correcting, not interfering, just present. Ryder looked up. You're not helping. Alexander raised an eyebrow slightly. Do you need help? Ryder shook his head. No, I just thought you were going to try. Alexander leaned back slightly. I'm letting you figure it out. Ryder considered that, then nodded. Okay, that's actually better. Vanessa stood in the kitchen, listening, not stepping in, because this was something she couldn't teach. It had to form on its own. Later that night, as Vanessa cleaned up, she glanced toward the living room. Ryder and Alexander sat side by side again, not talking much, but not distant either. Comfortable. Vanessa paused. Because this wasn't temporary anymore. It wasn't a moment. It was becoming part of their life. And that was where things became real. Alexander stood to leave shortly after. I'll call tomorrow, he said. Vanessa nodded. Okay. Ryder looked up. You better. Alexander met his gaze. I will. No hesitation, no adjustment. Just certainty. Vanessa watched him leave, then looked at Ryder. You okay? She asked. Ryder shrugged. He shows up. Vanessa nodded slowly. Yes. He does. And for the first time, that wasn't a question anymore. Vanessa didn't trust easily. Not because she didn't want to, but because she understood what it cost when trust was misplaced. And now, that cost felt closer than ever. It had been weeks, not days, not moments. Weeks. And Alexander had done exactly what he said he would do. He showed up. He called. He followed through. No excuses. No adjustments. No sudden changes. And that consistency, that steady presence, was starting to create something Vanessa didn't expect. Conflict. She stood in the kitchen one evening drying a plate slowly, her thoughts moving faster than her hands. From the living room she could hear Ryder talking, explaining something again. Probably a game. Probably something simple. And Alexander responded, not with long explanations, not with correction, but with attention. That was the difference. He listened. Fully. And Vanessa noticed that more than anything else. Because there was a time when she didn't feel heard, not ignored, but not fully seen either. And now, she was watching him give that to Ryder naturally. Without effort, without being asked. Vanessa placed the plate down and leaned against the counter, her arms folding lightly. Her mind wasn't calm. It wasn't chaotic either. It was divided, because what she saw didn't match what she remembered. And that created tension. Not outside. Inside. Mom? She looked up. Ryder stood at the edge of the kitchen. You coming? Vanessa straightened slightly. Yeah. She followed him into the living room. Alexander glanced up briefly, not interrupting the moment, just acknowledging her presence. Vanessa sat on the edge of the couch. Ryder continued talking. And if you press this too early, you lose the whole level. Alexander nodded. Got it. Vanessa watched them. Not closely, but intentionally, because this was where things became difficult. Not the past, not the absence, but the present, where everything started to feel real again. Later that night, Ryder had gone to bed. The apartment returned to its quiet state. Vanessa sat at the table, her phone resting in front of her. She wasn't using it, just staring at it. Thinking. Alexander stood near the door, getting ready to leave. I'll pick him up tomorrow, he said. Vanessa nodded. Okay. He paused for a moment. Then, you don't have to stay up every time I'm here. Vanessa looked up. That's not why I stay up. Alexander didn't push that further. He understood what she meant. It wasn't about supervision. It was about awareness. He left shortly after. The door closed, and the quiet returned. Vanessa remained at the table, still, thinking. Because this was the part she couldn't ignore anymore. Trust wasn't something she could delay forever. At some point, it had to move forward, or it would hold everything back. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Why now? She whispered to herself, not questioning him, questioning the timing, the shift, the change, because it would have been easier if he stayed the same. If he showed up once, then disappeared again, that would have been familiar. Predictable, safe, but this consistency, this presence, it challenged everything she had settled into. The next afternoon, Vanessa arrived at the school earlier than usual. She didn't tell Alexander. She didn't announce it. She just showed up and waited. Ryder walked out, looked around, then smiled slightly when he saw Alexander. Vanessa watched that. Not the interaction, the reaction, because it was genuine. Unforced. Ryder walked toward him. Hey, Alexander replied. You're early again. I said I would be. Ryder nodded. Okay. Simple. Easy. Vanessa stepped forward then. Both of them turned. Ryder looked surprised. Mom? I got off early, she said. Alexander didn't react beyond acknowledgement. No discomfort. No adjustment. Just presence. That mattered. They walked back together, not as a unit, but not separate either. Ryder talked, mostly to Alexander, occasionally to Vanessa, and Vanessa listened, not to the words, but to the rhythm, because something had formed. Naturally, without force. That night, Vanessa sat alone again after Ryder went to bed. This time, she wasn't avoiding the thought. She faced it, directly, I'm starting to trust him. The words felt unfamiliar, not wrong, just new, and with that came something else. Fear, not fear of him. Fear of what trusting him again could mean, because trust opened doors, and doors led to places she wasn't sure she wanted to go back to. Vanessa stood up slowly, walking toward the window, looking out, grounding herself, because this wasn't about the past. It couldn't be. If it was, everything would fall apart again. This had to be different, built differently, handled differently, and that meant she had to change too. Not completely, but enough. Vanessa exhaled slowly, and for the first time, she didn't pull back from the feeling. She acknowledged it, quietly, carefully, without rushing it, because trust was no longer the question. It was the risk. The shift didn't happen all at once. There was no single moment Vanessa could point to and say, that's when everything changed. It happened in pieces, small ones, built over time, and eventually, those pieces began to hold weight. It started with something simple. Vanessa had a late meeting at the clinic. Nothing unusual, but it meant she wouldn't be home in time. She stood in the kitchen that afternoon, phone in hand, staring at Alexander's name on the screen, not hesitant, just aware, because this wasn't about asking for help. It was about allowing it. That difference mattered. She pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Hey. Vanessa leaned slightly against the counter. I'm running late today. Okay. I need someone to pick Ryder up. A brief pause. Not uncertainty. Just processing. I can do that, Alexander said. Vanessa closed her eyes for a second. Not out of relief, out of decision. All right. No extra instructions. No conditions added. That alone marked a change. When Vanessa got home that evening, the apartment lights were on. She stepped inside quietly. No tension. No uncertainty. Just awareness. From the kitchen, she heard voices. Ryder's first. You're doing it wrong again. Alexander's response came calmly. Then explain it again. Vanessa walked in. Ryder looked up immediately. Mom. Vanessa nodded. How was everything? Good, Ryder said. He picked me up on time. Vanessa glanced at Alexander. He didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Because that statement, that confirmation, carried enough. Dinner was already made. Not elaborate, not complicated, but done. Vanessa noticed that. You didn't have to do this, she said. Alexander shrugged slightly. We needed to eat. Ryder added, and he didn't mess it up. Vanessa almost smiled. Almost. They sat down together. Not forced, not planned, just natural. Ryder talked through most of the meal. About school, about something a classmate said, about a game he wanted to finish later. Alexander listened, responded when needed, didn't take over. Vanessa watched, and something settled. Not completely, but enough. After dinner, Ryder disappeared into his room. For once, without being told, Vanessa stayed at the table, collecting plates slowly. Alexander stood nearby, not leaving yet, not lingering unnecessarily, just present. You trusted me today, he said. Vanessa didn't look up immediately. I made a decision, she replied. Alexander nodded slightly. I won't take that lightly. Vanessa met his gaze. I know. That answer came without hesitation, and that was new. A quiet moment followed. Not tense, not uncertain, just real. Alexander stepped closer, not into her space, but near enough to be honest. I'm not trying to replace anything, he said. Vanessa leaned back slightly against the counter. You can't, she replied. I know. Another pause. Then, I'm trying to build something, he added. Vanessa studied him, not searching for flaws, not expecting mistakes, just listening. With him, he clarified, and with you. If that's even possible. The second part stayed softer, less certain. Vanessa didn't respond immediately, because that part carried weight, not from the past, from what it could become. We don't build anything based on what we had before, she said. Alexander nodded. I understand. We build based on what we do now. I agree. There was no resistance, no hesitation, just alignment, and that That was different. Vanessa crossed her arms lightly. Not defensive, grounded. This doesn't mean everything changes, she said. I'm not expecting that. It doesn't mean I forget anything. I wouldn't ask you to. Vanessa held his gaze, long enough to confirm something, not perfection, not certainty, but intention. And for the first time, that felt enough to move forward. Alexander stepped back slightly. I'll call tomorrow, he said. Vanessa nodded. Okay. Ryder's voice came from down the hall. Don't forget. Alexander looked toward the hallway. I won't. Vanessa watched that exchange. Simple, but meaningful. Because now, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about maintaining it. After Alexander left, Vanessa stood alone in the kitchen. The apartment felt quiet again, but not the same quiet as before. This one felt settled, not finished, but stable. She leaned against the counter, exhaling slowly. Because something had changed, not dramatically, not suddenly, but clearly. She trusted him. Not fully, not blindly, but enough to move forward without holding everything back. And that was the turning point. The change didn't need to be announced anymore. It showed up on its own, in the way morning started, in the way evenings settled, in the way presence no longer felt temporary. Vanessa noticed it first in the small things. Ryder didn't ask if Alexander was coming. He expected it. Not every day, but enough that it felt normal. That difference mattered. One afternoon, Ryder sat at the table doing homework, his pencil moving quickly across the page. Alexander sat across from him, reviewing something on his laptop, but not disconnected. Aware. Ryder looked up. You're not helping again. Alexander didn't look away from the screen. Do you need help? Ryder shook his head. No. I just wanted to see if you would try. Alexander closed the laptop halfway. I'm here if you need me. Ryder considered that, then nodded. Okay. He went back to his work. Vanessa stood near the doorway, watching without interrupting. Because this balance, didn't happen by accident. It was built. Evenings had shifted too. Dinner was no longer just routine. It had become shared space. Not forced. Not scheduled. Just consistent. Ryder talked more now. Not just about games. About school. About things that didn't make sense to him yet. Why do teachers say things twice? He asked one night. Vanessa looked up. Because not everyone listens the first time. Ryder frowned. I listened the first time. Alexander glanced at him. Then the second time isn't for you. Ryder thought about that. Then nodded. Okay. That makes sense. Vanessa smiled slightly. Not because of the answer. Because of the exchange. The shift wasn't just in routine. It was in connection. Ryder no longer observed Alexander. He interacted with him. Fully. Naturally. Without hesitation. Are you coming to my school thing next week? Ryder asked one evening. Vanessa looked up immediately. She hadn't mentioned it yet. Alexander didn't answer right away. What time is it? He asked. Ryder shrugged. After school. They didn't say exactly. Vanessa stepped in. It's Thursday. Alexander nodded. I'll be there. Ryder didn't react strongly. He just said, okay, and went back to what he was doing. But Vanessa noticed something. He didn't question it. He didn't ask again. Because now, he expected it to happen. That expectation, that quiet trust, was new, and it carried weight. Later that night, Vanessa stood in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. Alexander leaned against the counter across from her, not speaking immediately, just present. You've created something stable here, he said. Vanessa didn't look up. I had to. Alexander nodded. I can see that. She turned off the water, dried her hands slowly. This doesn't change what it took to get here, she said. I know. Vanessa looked at him, not guarded, but clear. And it doesn't mean I stopped paying attention. I wouldn't expect you to. That answer came without hesitation, and that mattered. Vanessa leaned slightly against the counter. You're doing what you said you would do, she said. Alexander met her gaze. I am. She nodded once. Not approval, recognition. That matters, she added. Alexander didn't respond immediately, because he understood what that meant. Not acceptance, but progress. From the hallway, Ryder's voice called out. Are you both coming? Vanessa looked toward the hallway. For what? The game, he replied. You said we'd finish it. Vanessa glanced at Alexander briefly, then back toward the hallway. We're coming. Ryder's footsteps moved quickly back into the living room. Vanessa walked past Alexander, not avoiding him, not slowing down, just moving naturally. He followed, and for the first time, it didn't feel like he was stepping into their space. It felt like he was part of it. They sat together, 3 different positions, one shared moment. Ryder handed them both controllers. Don't mess it up this time, he said. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. That depends on you. Alexander added, I'm still learning. Ryder nodded. Then keep up. The game started. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but together. And that was enough. This wasn't about fixing the past. It wasn't about replacing anything. It was about building something that could hold in the present. And for the first time, it wasn't fragile. The shift had been steady, reliable, predictable in a way Vanessa hadn't allowed herself to depend on before. And that was exactly why the disruption mattered. Thursday came. The school event. Ryder had mentioned it more than once, not excited in an overwhelming way, but aware that it mattered. Vanessa had adjusted her schedule, left work early, planned her timing carefully, and Alexander had said he would be there. Vanessa stood near the entrance of the school, scanning the area as parents gathered in small groups. Ryder stood beside her, looking around with quiet focus, not searching wildly, just checking. Vanessa noticed that. Relax, she said softly. It hasn't started yet. Ryder nodded, but he didn't stop looking. Minutes passed. More people arrived. Teachers moved through the space. Children gathered in clusters. Vanessa checked the time, then again, not anxious, but aware, because time meant something different now. It wasn't just minutes, it was expectation. Ryder spoke again. He said he'd be here. Vanessa looked down at him. He will be. Her voice was steady, but inside, something shifted, because this moment, this one, carried more weight than the others. This wasn't a casual visit. This wasn't routine. This was something Ryder had marked. More minutes passed. The event began organizing. Students were being directed into position. Vanessa felt Ryder move slightly closer to her, not clinging, just adjusting, and that alone told her everything. Mom. She looked down. Yeah? What if he doesn't come? The question was quiet, but it carried something deeper than curiosity. Vanessa crouched slightly, meeting his eyes. He said he would. Ryder held her gaze. That doesn't mean he will. That landed. Not because it was wrong, but because it was learned. Vanessa placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. He's been showing up, she said. Ryder nodded, but he didn't look convinced. Vanessa stood back up. Her eyes moved toward the entrance again. This time, more focused, not just waiting, watching, because now it mattered, not just for Ryder, for everything they had been building. Another minute passed. Then, movement at the entrance. Vanessa saw him, walking in, not rushed, not careless, focused, present, and right on the edge of being late. Ryder saw him too. His posture changed immediately, not dramatically, but enough. There he is, Ryder said. No excitement, no outburst, just confirmation. Alexander walked over. I'm sorry, he said. Traffic was... Vanessa didn't interrupt, but she didn't soften it either. You said you'd be here. Alexander nodded. I know. Ryder looked at him. You're late. Alexander crouched slightly. You're right. No explanation added. No excuse stretched further. Just acknowledgement. Ryder studied him, then asked, Are you still staying? Alexander met his gaze. I'm here. Ryder held that for a second, then nodded. Okay. And just like that, the moment shifted. Not erased, but accepted. Vanessa watched that carefully, because this was the difference. Not perfection, not timing, accountability, and how it was handled. The event began. Ryder moved into place with the other students. Vanessa and Alexander stood side by side, not speaking immediately, but aware of each other. He noticed Vanessa said quietly. Alexander nodded. He should have. Vanessa looked forward. That matters more than being late. Alexander understood. I won't let it happen again. Vanessa didn't respond, not because she disagreed, but because this wasn't about promises anymore. It was about patterns. As the students performed, Ryder glanced toward them once, not searching, checking, and when he saw both of them there, he continued. Without hesitation, after the event, Ryder walked toward them. That was easy, he said. You did well, Vanessa replied. Alexander added, You stayed focused. Ryder shrugged. I saw you. Vanessa looked at him. What do you mean? Ryder pointed slightly. You were both there. That was it. Simple. Clear. Enough. They walked out together. Not rushed. Not distant. Just aligned. Outside, Ryder looked at Alexander again. Don't be late next time. Alexander nodded. I won't. Ryder accepted that. Okay. Vanessa walked beside them. Quiet, but not withdrawn, because what just happened, that was the test. Not whether he would be perfect, but how he would respond when he wasn't. And he didn't deflect, didn't avoid, didn't over-explain. He stayed, owned it, and remained present. That mattered more than anything else. And for the first time, Vanessa didn't feel like she was waiting for something to go wrong. The days that followed didn't try to prove anything. They didn't need to, because what had been uncertain before now carried weight on its own. The rhythm of their lives settled into something real. Not perfect, not controlled, but dependable. Mornings started earlier now, not because they had to, but because there was more movement in the space. Vanessa moved between the kitchen and the hallway, making sure everything stayed on track. Ryder followed his routine without reminders, and Alexander, when he was there, fit into it without disrupting it. Shoes, Vanessa said one morning, glancing toward Ryder. I know, Ryder replied, already reaching for them. Alexander stood near the door, watching the exchange. You've got a system, he said. Vanessa didn't look up. It works. Alexander nodded. I won't change it. That response didn't go unnoticed. Vanessa handed Ryder his bag. Let's go. School drop-offs became shared, not scheduled formally, but understood. Some days, Vanessa handled it. Some days Alexander did, and on certain mornings, they all went together, not talking much, but not distant either. One morning, as they stood outside the school, Ryder adjusted his backpack and looked between them. You both don't have to come every time. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. Why not? Ryder shrugged. I'm just saying, I'm not 5. Alexander glanced at him. Do you want us to stop? Ryder thought for a second. Then, no. Vanessa nodded. That's what I thought. Ryder walked toward the entrance, then paused, turned slightly. You're both coming later, right? Vanessa answered first. Yes. Alexander followed. I'll be there. Ryder nodded once. Okay. Then he went inside. No hesitation, no second look. That confidence, that quiet certainty, was new, and it showed. Later that evening, they sat together again. Same space, same rhythm, different feeling. Ryder leaned back on the couch, holding his controller loosely. So, I have a question. Vanessa glanced at him. That usually means trouble. Ryder ignored that. If I'm part of a rich family now, does that mean I'm rich too? Vanessa looked at him directly. No, Ryder frowned. But it said, I know what it said, she replied. That doesn't change how life works. Ryder turned to Alexander. You're rich, right? Alexander didn't react immediately. I do well. That means yes, Ryder said. Alexander gave a slight nod. All right. Ryder leaned back again. So when does that apply to me? Vanessa crossed her arms. It doesn't. Ryder sat up slightly. That doesn't make sense. It does, Vanessa said, because what you have isn't based on money. Ryder looked confused. What does that even mean? Vanessa leaned forward slightly. It means you're not defined by what someone else has, she said. You're defined by what you build. Ryder processed that, slowly, then looked at Alexander again. So I still have to clean my room? Alexander answered this time. Yes. Ryder dropped back against the couch. Yeah. This isn't what I expected. Vanessa laughed. Life rarely is. A quiet moment followed. Not heavy, not uncertain, just full. Ryder looked between them again, then asked, "So, are we like a team now?" Vanessa didn't answer immediately. She looked at Alexander, not searching, not questioning, just acknowledging. Then she looked back at Ryder. "We're working on it," she said. Ryder nodded. "Okay." That was enough. The room settled again. But this time, there was no hesitation attached to it, no waiting for something to shift, no expectation of disruption, just presence. Vanessa leaned back slightly, her gaze moving between both of them, because this wasn't what she had planned. It wasn't what she expected, and it definitely wasn't what she once thought her life would look like. But it worked, not because it was easy, not because it was perfect, but because it was real, built on choices, not assumptions. Alexander sat beside Ryder, not distant, not imposing, present, and Ryder didn't question it anymore. Vanessa exhaled slowly, not out of relief, but acceptance, because the past hadn't disappeared. It hadn't been erased, but it no longer controlled what came next. What they had now, was something different, not starting over, starting right. Before we close this story, if this journey meant something to you, go ahead and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, do you believe people can truly grow, or do they just learn how to appear different? Because sometimes, life doesn't give you closure when you expect it. Sometimes, it gives you another chance, and what you do with that chance is what defines everything.